you? I know it's been a while and I'm excited to bring you guys another very simple solution today. Today we're going to be making some regular white bread. This has been an amazing find and a very useful thing for my family. We run, we try to stay healthy, we do some, everything we can to try and be healthy. And I started making this recipe because I looked at our bread one day and we had had it for a week or two and it didn't mold, and I thought, that just doesn't seem normal to me. Bread should kind of get old. And so I started looking at the ingredients that were in the bread, and there just seemed like there was a lot going into the bread. And so what we put into our bodies is something that we really try and focus on. We try and keep it, as simple as possible and go with fresh foods as much as possible and homemade. And so this is something that is not that laborious, it's not that time consuming to do, and it's just an easy way to make sure that we're eating something that is good for us and that we know exactly what goes in to these ingredients and into this bread. So we eat bread a lot. My daughter eats a sandwich every single day. So for her lunch, loves her sandwiches. So it was important to me that I was giving her a very healthy option to be able to do that. So that is the premise behind this recipe. I hope that you take this and are able to use this for your family, and that it works for you. We love it. We think it's a great option for our family. So without further ado, here we go. Okay, so the first step that I do when I'm making this bread, there are two measurements for water, and one is for the yeast, and then the other is just water and butter. It melts the butter in there. So that's what I do first. And in the one for the yeast, it requires 0.38 cups of water. So, and this is just a guesstimate on my part. Obviously that's not going to be listed on this lovely Pyrex or Anchor Hawking, sorry Anchor Hawking, Oven Originals measuring cup. The 0.38 is not on there. So I go as close as I can from the 1/3 cup, in between the 1/3 cup and 1/2. And I put a little bit of sugar, probably just a teaspoon in there, and then I get that water. For the other measuring cup, this one is 1.5 cups of water, and into that I put in 1/4 cup of sugar and 1.5 tablespoons of butter. You want the water very warm so that it melts the butter, and you also want the water very warm for this water so that it will just make the yeast come alive and start activating that yeast. So I'm going to do that and we'll be right back. So I have added the water levels that I need for the bread, and I've got the 1.5 cups, and to that I am going to add 1.5 tablespoons of softened butter. It helps if you kind of chunk the butter up a little bit first. It helps it melt faster, obviously, science. If there's less density in the butter, then it's gonna melt faster, right? So that is what I do for the butter. And then I just give it a quick little stir to help it start up. Back it up. And then for the yeast, we are going to put in 2 teaspoons of yeast into the 0.38 cups of water, or cup of water, because there's not even one. So it would just be cup. So, and then I just give that a quick little stir and let that do its job. It's going to take a couple minutes for that yeast to activate and come alive, and it's going to become all bubbly and foamy and do its job. And so we have got the measuring cup with the water, the sugar. It's got 1/4 of a cup of sugar in there that is dissolving as well with the butter. And then here is the measuring cup with the yeast, and it's already doing its thing and getting all pretty and foamy. While those things are melting and coming alive, I go ahead and measure out my 4 cups of flour. I use all-purpose flour. You could probably use bread flour or anything else that you feel like that your family likes better. So I do that. So I have the 4 cups of flour measured out into my bowl, and to that I am going to add a teaspoon of salt. You can add a little bit more if you'd like. I think the recipe probably calls for a little bit more, but you know, anything that we can do to reduce the amount of salt that we take in. You'd be surprised how much salt that we actually eat in a day. So anything that I can do to reduce that is always a good thing. So I just measure that. They say a teaspoonful is like what you can get in your palm, like in the very cup of your palm of your hand. So that's not an exact measurement. You may feel free to exactly measure that if you so choose. So I just give that a quick stir. My yeast is still working, my butter is still melting, so I'm going to give those things a couple more minutes and then add those to the flour mixture. Okay, so my butter is now melted into the water, and my yeast is now all frothy and foamy and alive. So it's going to be able to activate and make this bread all nice and poofy, which is what we like. I don't know if poofy is an internet-worthy word, but that's what we do. So I'm gonna add this to the flour. This is just such a simple recipe, and I make it probably 2 times a week, maybe just once a week. It depends on what we're doing and how much bread we have eaten. Sometimes people go through stages and kicks in the house where they'll have peanut butter toast for breakfast, and sometimes they won't. So it just depends on what everybody's been eating and how often I do this. But at least once a week, sometimes twice, not more than that. You can also, actually I halved this recipe, which is why the measurements are kind of crazy, like 0.38, because I didn't feel like we would use the full amount. And the recipe does say that you could freeze the bread and use it later, get it out of the freezer and use it, but I just, I didn't want to go through that much trouble. I would rather make it more frequently than I would make a bigger loaf and it freeze and then have to defrost it. And because I know me, I wouldn't get it out of the freezer in time, so then we would be waiting on the bread to defrost, and it would just be, it wouldn't work well. I know me. So I have my 4 cups of flour, and I am incorporating all of the liquids into that now. So we're just getting that all mixed in together. You want the dough, it's not going to be sticky, but you don't want it super dry either, because then your bread will be dry. Your dough and how wet and sticky and or dry it is will determine, you know, you don't want your bread to dry out. So you really want to get a right consistency with that. So don't let it be sticky, but don't over flour it either. It shouldn't be so tough that you can't, you know, mix it all in together. So if you put too much flour in there, I would probably go ahead and just add a little more water to it. So we don't use, and this is what, your hands are your best tools. That's what, you know, start with clean hands, guys, always. But a chef's best tools are their hands. So usually at the end of this process, I get in there and mix it with my hands. If it is a little bit too wet, then you can add a little bit more flour. Don't be afraid, you know, to do stuff like that. You're not gonna ruin it. It's just bread. So it's not like a souffle or something that if everything isn't completely, you know, perfect, it's all gonna fall, or macaroon. How many people have tried to make those? I tried to make them like once and was so completely overwhelmed that it scared me, and I never tried again. So actually I may have tried one more time and was like, yeah, that's, or I watched the videos anyways and was like, that's just a little too intense for me. So I have made the dough. This is what it looks like in my bowl. And so I'm gonna do a quick wash on my hands. I'm gonna get a clean dish rag. I'm going to cover the bowl and it's gonna sit and double. So probably about 30 minutes. And then I'll go over step number 2 with you guys. So we'll see you in a minute. So I've repositioned my camera so you can see me rolling this out. It's not, you know, rocket science, but there is a little bit of a different technique before you put it in the pan. This is the pans that we use. I use 2, and I believe these are 7-inch pans. You can buy 9-inch pans, and that's another reason why I have the recipe. I only had 7-inch pans, and I didn't want to buy 9-inch pans. So there you go. So you want to put a little bit of oil into each of your pans. And this is how I spread the oil because I don't want to use my hands. So I get a piece of paper towel and I take it and just go all around my pan, because I think it's really hard to have oil on your hands and then have to roll out your dough. So this is one of my little tricks of the trade, I guess. And like I said, I've done this so much that I really don't even have the recipe out anymore. It's just one of those things that I've done. So I'm gonna move this a little bit so you can see me. I know there's a person talking to you. So I just make sure it's nice and floury. You're going to roll this into a rectangle, and you want the smaller ends, you're going to roll those up, and I guess I will show you what that means in just a minute. So I'm going to keep working on this, and when I get it to where we'll do the actual rolling up of the dough, then I'll come back for you. This is what it looks like, completely rolled out to the way that we need it. You want to make sure when you're rolling it out, the purpose of rolling it out and in this manner is to get the air bubbles out. If you bought loaf bread, and you know, we all have, and you got a loaf and it has like a hole, like, you know, through like several pieces of the bread, and that's what an air bubble does. So that's why they're bad. That's why you don't want any of those in your dough. So you want to roll it out kind of thin, just to make sure that there are no air bubbles. So then what we do, and I'm gonna start from this end, even though this is typically not what I do. I always start from the frying stand and go this way. But so that you can see what I'm doing, it doesn't matter. I'm sure it doesn't. But so you just take your dough and you roll it. Rolling, rolling, rolling. And you kind of want it to be kind of uniform, because if not, then you'll end up with, you know, too big of a piece of, and this is kind of, you know, it's not as even as I'd like. But if you can see that, see how it does that. So so make it as even as you can. So you've rolled it, and then to make the end pieces, you just kind of pinch it together and tuck it under. So, so I'll do it this way. Maybe, you know, you really can't see, but I'm just pinching it and kind of rolling it under, and that creates the end piece. I don't know what you called it. When I was growing up, unfortunately, we called it something that, you know, my kids aren't, you know, it's a word that I don't even like for my kids to use. So it's the end piece. And I don't know what you guys call it. You'll have to let me know what you do. So, and then you just take it and put it into your loaf pan. And so it looks like this in the loaf pan. And I am going to get the second one done, and then I will come back and show you the next step. Okay guys, now I am over here at my oven, and so I have the oven preheating to 400 degrees. I have the bread placed on top of my oven, and I'm going to cover them with a clean dishcloth. That was harder to say than it should have been. So, and you can see I've got flour all over me. I'm sorry. I should wear an apron, but I guess this is why I don't, you know, dress up during the day. I know I'm going to get stuff on me. So anyways, I'll get all that off later. But this is going to raise for probably 20 to 30 minutes. You'll see what it looks like after it's raised, and it's gorgeous and exciting, and I hope that y'all don't think this is too difficult. It's really not. I hope that I'm making this sound as simple as it is. There are definitely ways that you could make this more difficult by you know, completely weighing out. You'll see that my loaves are going to be two different sizes, because I just guesstimate when I separate them, and you can absolutely make that more uniform by measuring that and weighing them and everything. But this is Simple Solutions, guys, and I've got 3 kids and pastor's wife and everything else. So, you know, we're all about time saving, but doing it in a healthy way too. So this is one of the things that we do to make that happen. Anyways, so I hope that you guys enjoy this recipe, and I'll be back in just a second. So we are ready to get this bread in the oven, and as you can see, it looks amazing. And so what I do, this just gives it a little bit of color and some nice brown on the very top of it. So I add just a little bit of butter and I use unsalted butter too, just in case you were wondering that, what kind of butter. I just use unsalted butter. Okay, so that is all. Now, I put this in at 400 degrees for 17 minutes. That's what it says around, the directions say around 18 or so, and you just have to find what works for you. 17 minutes is the perfect time for us. It's supposed to go on your bottom rack in your oven. So I put it on the bottom rack. It doesn't really raise a whole lot higher than what you see right there. So I'm going to set my timer. 17, start. While that is cooking, I did want to show you one other thing. And because one of the big problems when I was thinking about making my bread was like, okay, well, how am I going to store it? Because that'll be a problem. It's a pain to have to unwrap aluminum foil and plastic wrap, you know, every single time. So this is what I found. I found it on Amazon, and it says lock, and I don't even remember, but it is incredibly neat. It works very well for us. It has a little divider thing in here. We use it for all kinds of bread. If I make something else that's bread, it'll go in here too. It obviously fits a full loaf quite well. So it works. It keeps everything, you know, airtight. You want to make sure that your bread is cool before you put it in here, or you'll get condensation, of course. So the other tip that I will give you, and then the last thing that you'll see is the finished product, is slice the bread. Go ahead and slice it, because if your kids are anything like my kids, if they have to slice it and it makes it difficult to grab, then they won't eat it. So go ahead, and the first loaf that you're using, if you make more than one, go ahead and slice it. The second loaf, we don't slice. I wrap it in plastic wrap and then aluminum foil over the plastic wrap, and it just stays on my counter until we're ready for it, which is usually 3-4 days maybe, is what one loaf lasts us, and then it's just ready to use when we're ready for the next loaf. So I hope y'all have enjoyed this, and the last thing I'll show you is the finished product. We'll see you in a minute. Okay guys, this is the finished product. As you can see, it is beautiful, and what we do is we let it cool for a couple minutes inside the pans, then I take it out and put it on the rack and let it cool all the way. You don't want to leave it in the air too long, because of course that will dry it out, but you don't want to wrap it up or put it in the container before it is cooled down, because then that will create condensation and mold. So just get it completely cool and then get it put up, and you'll have the best white bread, and you know exactly what's in it, and that's the important thing. So you'll have a healthy alternative for your family. I hope you enjoy this. We'll talk to you later. Bye.